Hello, and welcome to Hack and Hustle, where we explore the ups, downs, and lessons learned in the world of cybersecurity, sales, and marketing with a deep dive on a topic each week. I'm Anthony Johnson.
And I'm Brad Rager. And this week, we'll be talking about conferences from the perspective of vendors. There's a shitload of money spent. Is it worth it? And if so, how do you get a good ROI on it? All right, Anthony, we're recording this in late July, right before the fun and chaos of Black Hat, DEF CON, Hacker Summer Camp. This will be on the air as part of our launch after Black Hat. That's a little inside baseball for the fans. But tell me about Black Hat. What are you planning this year? What's your game plan, man?
So this is actually going to be our first year doing some like legit marketing stuff for Black Hat. So we're
Nice.
flying. We're gonna have 5, 6 of us, 7 of us out there. We are sponsoring a pool party that will be going down. Last year we had like 1,000 people and 250 CISOs there.
It was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
it was pretty fantastic.
it was good. But there's always 2 Black Hats, right? There's like same with 2 RSAs. Like there's Black Hat, the conference, and then there's all the suites and parties, and then you have to make it. There is a decision though at Black Hat. You are one of 2 types of people. You go to bed before 11, or you don't.
I think, you know what I am? I'm the guy who goes to bed after 11 one night, and then the rest of the nights are wiped out.
Well, there is the 3-2 rule one, right? You have 3 hours of sleep, 2 meals a day, 1 shower. And that's how you survive Black Hat and DEF CON. I was taught that when I first started going many moons ago as a younger man.
And then you recover from COVID the following week.
Yeah. This is true. This is absolutely true.
So if you put your Delve Risk hat on, how do you think about like Black Hat versus RSA versus, the bazillion other conferences that are out there? Like, who are they for? What makes sense when you think about those?
Yeah. So, and part of the value for these big conferences, and so let's look at the value for a security leader, right?
Yeah.
They can get vendor demos anytime, right? They don't need your T-shirt. Like they
or
can
socks.
mostly afford
or sword.
Yeah, or socks, right? They can mostly afford their own steaks, right? The real value for a lot of them is just the concentration of peers, friends, maybe seeing some new tech in a day, right, or in a couple of days, and being able to go spend time, shake hands with the VCs that they're working with, right? Sometimes they're looking at some new emerging stuff, but they can also solve that new emerging piece in different ways. So I think there is a huge element of networking that happens, which is why there's RSA 1, which is the RSA conference, and then there's RSA 2, which is all the suites and stuff that go on, right? And they both have different ROIs.
Yeah,
huge different ROIs.
Yeah. How do you think about that ROI, like from a vendor's perspective?
So if I were a vendor selling to cybersecurity leaders, I would look at what my goal is.
Yeah.
Is my goal to just create awareness for my name? And then you measure that, is it worth the $50,000-$70,000 booth cost plus the $75,000 setup cost plus the hotel and all the stuff to have people man it, right? And you're probably, because a lot of the times the actual decision makers aren't walking the floor proper, right?
Yep.
You're going to see people who are speakers, sure, but you're seeing more and more vendors as speakers, and then they're speaking to vendors a lot of the time, right? I think that you get a much bigger bang for the buck on the RSA 2. Same for the Black Hat 2, which this year RSA, or starting next year, RSA has gotten a handle on a bunch of like all the hotels and restaurants around them, and you now have to come to the mothership. So it's going to be fascinating to see how RSA 2 feels next year.
Yeah, I mean, I wondered that after Palo in particular wasn't officially at RSA this year. They were obviously present in San Francisco. You felt them, but it was, and Qualys was the same, right? And so, how does RSA? I mean, I don't think they have to be worried about a stampede out, but man, those booths are expensive. And if you're just looking at, hey, how many leads did I get on the show floor and how many of those are going to pan out into deals, I think it'd be hard pressed for any vendor to say, I get a
Yeah.
good ROI on the floor leads at an RSA,
Yeah, I think the floor leads is definitely a wash. I think it's the true value for most vendors is the suites,
Yeah.
but then that requires a lot of legwork for them to get people to book time to do the thing, and you're seeing VCs actually do some interesting thing. I won't say who, but I mean, this year at RSA they had Bill Clinton, and last year they had George W. Right, and they're hey CISOs, you want to come meet Bill Clinton? They're like, yeah. So I'm out. Hey guys, I want to go get a picture with Bill, right?
Yeah.
I got so many texts and jokes about that. And but which is why when it comes to vendors or it comes to the conference pieces, one of the things we recommend to customers is to look at the regional boutique events, right?
Yeah.
They're way less expensive. You're hitting somebody in a region defined market. And additionally, a lot of security leaders, their T&E budgets have been challenged, if not cut outright. Right.
Yeah.
So they're telling their team, hey, do something regional where I don't got to pay for this big travel. Right. And so I think we are kind of having a reckoning on some of those, some of that.
And are vendors getting good ROI on the floor leads at the regional conferences? Is that kind of a better deal, a better bargain?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I won't say which one, but there's a big ISSA chapter that I love. I know a lot of security leaders. It's $2,000 to be the platinum sponsor.
Wow, not bad.
And there's like 600 CISOs who love that and go religiously, and that doesn't even include their team members, right? And so you think you're like, hold on, it's $2,000. I got to bring a table. Maybe I set up a booth. I don't have to have these crazy, exorbitant this and that. Right, that is a much cleaner ROI story. Plus, you're supporting a specific region for a sales team member, so you can really hone in. I think that's a much cleaner story there.
Yeah. And I wonder for the big conferences, you don't have the budget for the booth. Makes sense to be there. Obviously, the networking and connection opportunities are amazing. Like, what have you seen companies do from like that guerrilla marketing perspective? There's obviously having a suite somewhere, and you want to book meetings with your CEO, but like, I don't know. I've seen some cool stuff on the streets around San Francisco and in Vegas and some of the events and stuff. What have you seen tactics you like? What do you think about that front?
Yeah, I have. We are actually doing some really cool stuff. Since this will come out post Vegas or post Black Hat, we've actually bought. So we got some stuff from China that's just going to be totally fascinating. They are backpacks with full LCD monitors on them, and we're running digital marketing ads. Walking around. So literally a digital billboard, right? That's one of the things that we're doing. We've done some other pieces. You see people that I think it was dope. They wrapped a cyber truck, at RSA, which is cool. It's interesting, right? Like it's hard to stand out in such a noisy space. At RSA this year, we had these video cards where it was like a card, you opened it up, it actually played an ad, it had a video screen in it. I was actually asked if we were doing that this year because for Black Hat, because other vendors are saying, hey, we don't want to do this if Delve Risk is also doing it already because they did it at RSA. And I'm like, okay, so how many vendors are going to be fast follows to copy? So like the moment you come up with something cool, everyone else is like, oh, that's cool, we're going to do that too. Right?
It gets arbitraged right away. Like how many, hey, come by our space that we rented out to recharge, in the chaos. Like you can come sit at our lounge and have a cocktail, right? And there's a lot of those.
and the problem is that if you come up with a savvy digital marketing piece, right?
Yeah.
You're probably doing that because you're scrappy, you're trying to save money, be creative, right? Um, and so you do something, and then somebody who has like a $15 million marketing budget is like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't you like throw a million or two at that? And you're like, okay, so like in order to be guerrilla, you have to be moving fast. Like, okay, what's the next
Yeah.
creative thing to kind of stay ahead, right? Because like I can't afford to buy a cyber truck and wrap it with Dell's wrist. Like, you know what I mean? Like what's the ROI on that? Like, what's the ROI on the cyber truck?
100%. 100%. I mean, the other thing I think about, right, is like, yes, okay, most people in our industry, they want to get to CISOs. They view CISOs as the buyer. We can have our own discussion about the intensity of the CISO focus. And, clearly Black Hat and RSA are the big conferences. You get exceptional turnout there. But I also wonder, depending on where you sit in security, I think there's a lot of opportunity at non-security conferences to
Yeah,
be a security voice, for industries. Go to HIMSS, go to places where there are folks from an IT standpoint and from a privacy standpoint or a data standpoint where you can have a perspective and bring some thought leadership. I think that's like an under recognized avenue when everybody's kind of piling into the same conferences or the
I
same,
a hundred
secure
percent.
worlds and that type of thing.
Yeah, 100% agree, right? But I think like I understand why. The
Yeah.
reason why I think that happens is that if I'm the CEO or I'm the VC, I can say, "Hey, you spoke at this security conference. There are potential security buyers. I can see a direct line to potential revenue." Right?
100%. Yeah.
If you speak at a chief privacy or a legal conference, it's like, well, none of our buyers are there, right? So like the
Yeah.
line isn't there, but it's like, oh no, but like they're going to influence and
Right.
educate. And so I think that the founders and the investors need to have a little more grace and understanding that this is not a direct line for influencing decision makers. There's a lot of this that has to happen. Um, and those types of conferences are hungry for security folks to come talk about topics, right?
Yeah.
But instead, we're all trying to pile into the same car.
Yep. Yep. So how do people get their arms around it? What do people need to look for when thinking about what conferences should we go to? Where's the value going to be?
One, I would I definitely look at the preferences, priorities, like things that the security leaders, their teams care about, right? I think
Yeah.
that's an important piece. Two, I would look for where there's nobody else doing something, right? Like and if you can be the only voice in there, like you're going to stand out. You can bring that out. You can repurpose that content, right? Like let's say you give a talk to a couple hundred people at a legal conference. You should be able to take that video, that content, post it out, and you're demonstrating, hey, thought leadership, I'm adding value, all that type of stuff. And particularly any of the security leaders that where they have good relationships with their legal teams, where they are driven by second or third line or influence, like those are all factors that play in. So I think it's based on the preferences, priorities, board memberships. Like there's so much research that I think needs to happen to deeply understand your buyer, which is why we exist. There's actually something one other piece that I got to talk about though, which the Olympics are going on right now,
Yep.
and I actually mentioned this to a number of companies before. Most Olympic athletes aren't sponsored, right?
Yep.
Most Olympic athletes are like Uber drivers and whatever they can do because we don't pay our Olympic athletes. The U.S. doesn't, right? Other countries, some of them do.
Yeah.
And there's a clothing brand this year. If you were an unsponsored Olympic athlete, it gave you the clothes, like sportswear where it's just black. And it's because Olympic athletes were, running with a Nike thing, even though they weren't sponsored by Nike, and Nike was getting some press for it. So they were like, no, it's unbranded. And every time I saw that, I'm like, man, why wouldn't a cyber vendor be like, hey, I'll give you 30 grand. Just wear a shirt that says, like
Yeah.
ratings on it.
Better
right?
than buying an F1 car.
It's better than buying an F1
ROI wise.
car, right? And you'd be like, well, what do we get? I'm just saying, you get your name out there, and it costs you way less than buying a Cybertruck, right? Like, and you can
Yeah.
be like, oh, we're sponsored this athlete, we did this thing, right? Like, I think it's something to be said to maybe, people should look at the Summer Olympics. I'm even thinking about doing that. Like, do we sponsor like a Summer Olympic team? Just be like, hey man, we sponsored this Olympic team like for 20 grand. And God forbid they win. Holy smokes, if they win and they got your logo on there, like, oh, it's a wrap.
You're going to have to bone up on the decathlon and shot putting and judo and
like everything where there isn't a major sponsor, right? You could probably be like, oh, I'll give them 5. Listen, you wear my jacket, I'll give you 5 grand. Like,
ping pong,
break dancing. Like, I don't think anybody sponsored the break dancing this year, right? Like, oh, maybe it's the next Olympics, the winter, right? I think it's interesting.
All right. Well, let's do the roundup. If you have, one piece of advice, one takeaway, what would you share with folks?
I think that you have to look at conferences, events that are going on in your city, in where you're traveling, and really, really be deliberate, right? Yes, you could do it on the Delver's platform, so that'd be amazing. But being informed that you can get tremendous value without having to literally blow your marketing budget. There's lots of stuff that you can do. So I would say, be informed and make smart decisions because the regional stuff is growing so much.
Yeah. I think my piece of advice is you really got to know what your objective is. I think people operate as if the objective is, hey, let's get a bunch of leads on the show floor. I just, in my experience, have never seen that to be a great ROI. So I think you got a world where if you're in the zone of, hey, we want to raise awareness, that's a game of being pretty creative in your tactics and creative and thoughtful in terms of where you go to and do some unconventional things. Go to places that others aren't, or if you're at places that others are, do some things that are going to allow you to stand out. And if your objective is to deepen relationships, then build your strategy around that. Think about how you get people to come and spend time with you and build relationships and have genuine conversations. But I think it comes down to what's that objective? What are you trying to achieve? So
that's absolutely
awesome.
Great. No, I love that.
Awesome. Fun and timely discussion here, man. I hope it's a wonderful Black Hat for you. And if by the time folks are listening to this, I hope you had a great time at Black Hat and came home feeling good, not sick. All right. As always, Hack and Hustle is brought to you by Crux, the talent marketplace for cybersecurity.
And DelveRisk, the intelligence platform for cybersecurity, sales, and marketing.
If you have any questions you'd like us to answer or topics you want us to cover, drop us a line at pod@crux.so, and we will see you next week.